Hi there, and welcome back to this quiet corner where the universe takes its time and we simply follow along at a softer pace. Tonight, we're stepping into the strange, glowing wake of a visitor that refuses to behave like anything in our catalogues. This is the story of 3I Atlas, and the new image that has astronomers sitting very still, blinking very slowly, and asking themselves whether they're awake or dreaming through a physics problem no one assigned. Because tonight's topic is simple, but not soothing. A plume that should not exist, pointing exactly where no plume should ever point. It should have been a plume of dust, a lopsided puff, kicked off by the sun's warmth, tumbling away like all comet tails do. But what we got instead was narrow, straight, deliberate. It came from the dark side of 3I, Atlas, not outward, but inward. A jet of glowing matter pointed directly at the Sunday, not away from it, toward it, like a nozzle. The frame was time-stamped November 12th, 2025. It came from the Soho coronagraph, and at first, it looked like an error, a linear streak piercing the solar haze. But then other images surfaced. An independent observatory in Argentina caught the same angle. A ground telescope in Tenerife confirmed it. Even amateur astronomers recorded the jet with hydrogen alpha filters. 3 locations, 1 vector, a perfect line of fire aimed at the Sunday. Not a tail, a burn. We thought it was a comet. We thought 3I Atlas was just another interstellar traveler, flaring up on its approach. But this is not sublimation. This is directional thrust. And if that's true, then this object isn't just reacting to the sun, it's maneuvering around it. That's not supposed to be possible. Nothing natural does that. Nothing icy, nothing dead. Yet the thrust was clean, sustained, and timed just 30 days before perihelion, as if 3I Atlas was adjusting for an encounter, not a flyby, not a fall, an arrival. In ancient myths, the sun was the eye of God, the center of judgment, the place where spirits are burned clean. And across cultures, Sumerian, Egyptian, Andean visitors who curved toward the sun were never just messengers, they were tests. So ask yourself, what kind of intelligence points its exhaust at a star? What if this isn't a comet? What if it's something older, quieter, smarter, something that arrives only when we're finally able to see it for what it really is? And what if the burn wasn't propulsion, but punctuation? Where are you right now? What time is it? What's above you? You are not looking at a comet. Not anymore. The latest image, time-stamped November the 12th, 2025, shows something no natural object should possess. A symmetrical jet of material pointing directly at the sun. Like the ignition of a stabilizing burn, the shape is too focused, the plume too linear, the direction too precise. This is not sublimation. This is vector control, and for the first time, astronomers are whispering it out loud. Rocket exhaust. Captured by the ESA Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, the frame appeared at first to be a corrupted file. A thin, radiating spear jutted from the nucleus of 3I Atlas, framed perfectly against the limb of the Sunday. Technicians flagged it as a processing artifact, but the independent confirmations came in like falling dominoes. A private observatory in Argentina had logged the same structure, same angle, same moment, same burn. A ground-based solar telescope in Tenerife, Spain, caught the afterglow. Even amateur astronomers in Perth reported a flickering tail disturbance, visible only in narrowband hydrogen alpha filters. 3 different observatories, 2 hemispheres, 1 anomaly, directed thrust, NASA's internal Slack channel, partially leaked by an employee under pseudonym, described the burn as impossibly clean. The venting appeared to originate from a small aperture, roughly 200 meters wide, that remained cold during infrared analysis, suggesting artificial insulation. Natural jets widen and tumble. This one, aligned, sustained, and ceased with surgical precision. There was no accompanying fragment burst, no spin alteration, no outgassing chaos, just a clean correction, aimed directly at the gravitational heart of the solar system. The implications are terrifying. You may think this is still a comet. You may think comets behave unpredictably, sloughing off ice and dust as they near the Sunday. But 3I, Atlas, is doing something that no comet in recorded history has ever done, maintaining a solar relative orientation across days of observation. Every burn it makes is counterintuitive for an object supposedly tumbling through the void. It is not acting like an ice ball. It is acting like a probe. The date of this maneuver matters. November 12th marks exactly 30 days before 3I, Atlas reaches its critical perihelion phase. The burn placed it on a tighter spiral, shaving off angular velocity and increasing solar exposure time. According to Dr. Miriam Kelleher at the ESA Orbital Dynamics Group, this move defies logic unless the object's objective is interaction, not escape. A comet avoids heat. This thing is leaning in. The new orbit brings it within 1.39 astronomical units of the Sun, just outside Mars's orbital path. And yet, no natural perturbation could have caused this shift. It is not gravitational slingshotting. It is not random venting. The spectral profile of the exhaust, captured through accidental resonance, overlap with the Stereo B spacecraft's ultraviolet imager, shows signatures of metal oxides, including molybdenum and vanadium, not found in typical comet dust. These are materials used in high-temperature alloys, materials used in heat shielding, materials used in spacecraft engines. Here is where things get stranger. When compared to older footage, dating back to August, researchers notice something deeply unsettling. The exhaust vector points at the Sun, but not at its geometric center. Instead, it targets an offset region corresponding to an area of recent magnetic flux emergence. In simpler terms, it's aiming at the Sun's newest sunspot, sunspot AR3491, a region currently emitting elevated radio frequency bursts. That spot, AR3491, became the center of a coronal mass ejection just 12 days ago. The same event that disrupted GPS systems across North America and caused auroras in Thailand. Is it a coincidence that the object just adjusted its path to linger in alignment with that electromagnetic anomaly? Or is it part of a behavior pattern? And if so, what kind of object adjusts course to observe or even interact with a magnetic ripple on a star? Here's another layer. The burn occurred during a telemetry blackout. From 013 to 15 UTC, both NASA and ESA temporarily lost real-time telemetry from their sun-facing satellites. The gap was attributed to scheduled downlink recalibration. Yet, post-burn analysis shows a 27-second spike in energetic particles, too brief for solar wind and inconsistent with cosmic rays. No alarm was raised, no bulletin was issued, but embedded in the leaked files from the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory team was a line that nobody can explain. Too controlled to be chaos. This isn't dust. It's something talking to the Sunday. That brings us here, to you, lying in bed, listening to the soft hush of data transformed into story. Ask yourself, why would an interstellar object execute a deceleration maneuver, vector toward the Sun, and align with a magnetic structure known for radio emissions? Why would its exhaust appear artificially shaped? Why would the burn occur during a communications blackout? And why would all of this happen 1 month before perihelion, the point of closest approach? Dr. Marcus Young, at the Lunar Observatory Initiative, described it best. We're not seeing a flyby, we're seeing a rendezvous. Tonight, I want you to picture that not a comet skating past the Sun, but something braking, positioning, coordinating. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't just absorbing energy? What if it's talking back? Where are you watching from tonight? What time is it for you? Leave a comment. Someone out there, maybe even someone official, is reading what you write, because the truth is, this object just used a technology we don't understand to do something we wouldn't dare, and that was only the beginning. What if the plume we saw wasn't just a maneuver but a message? You have to understand something. Natural comets don't execute thrust burns during solar approach. They do not pause mid-trajectory, aim themselves with geometric precision, and dump heat-resistant metallic oxides into the solar wind stream. But that's exactly what 3I, Atlas, did. And since that moment, every hour of new data has only made the picture stranger. The first piece of evidence came not from Earth but from the Solar Orbiter spacecraft, a joint mission by the European Space Agency and NASA. On November 13th, its onboard magnetometer registered a directional pulse, a spike in field strength so crisp and so brief, it initially triggered a fault protocol. The orientation of that pulse matched the axis of the exhaust plume from 3I, Atlas's maneuver, 12 hours prior. In other words, the object didn't just burn it broadcast. ESA issued no public statement. NASA's live data stream experienced a 5-minute interruption. And yet, when telemetry resumed, quiet changes had been made to the orbiter's trajectory planning scripts. A reroute, positioning it farther from the inbound trajectory of 3I, Atlas. They didn't say why, but the math makes the reason obvious. They're making room. Something is coming in faster and closer than previously projected. Here's the second anomaly. After the maneuver, 3I, Atlas's tail, did not behave like a comet's tail should. In normal cases, solar radiation pressure pushes ejected material directly away from the Sun, forming a long, diffuse tail of dust and gas. But in the latest imagery, 3I, Atlas's tail curved toward the Sun in a soft arc. That curve is physically impossible unless the particles are being manipulated by something stronger than sunlight. Researchers at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics have quietly suggested a radical possibility: electromagnetic tail steering. In other words, the object is using solar plasma as a medium for control. This would imply that it not only understands the Sun's dynamic field, it can navigate through it. One senior researcher, speaking anonymously, called it a form of heliospheric sailing. A third anomaly came from the Parker Solar Probe, currently orbiting closer to the Sun than any spacecraft in history. On November 14th, its Fields instrument package picked up a patterned sequence in radio bursts, 5 rapid pulses, spaced by precisely 3.6 seconds each, followed by silence. Then it repeated, again and again, 5 pulses, 3.6 seconds apart. The number 5 has shown up before 5 visible jet points on 3I, Atlas's nucleus, in early October, and the number 3.6, if you've been following this story, you already know that 3,600 years is the precise period cited in ancient Sumerian calendars for the return of the sky gods from the direction of Sagittarius, the very region from which 3I, Atlas, entered our system. Coincidence is no longer sufficient. Dr. Avi Loeb, who has followed this object's trajectory since its discovery, issued a closed-door briefing to the Galileo project on November 15th. According to insiders, he presented a reconstruction of the burn that revealed an intentional angular deceleration designed to synchronize 3I, Atlas's path, with Earth's orbital frame. Not a collision course, but a co-orbital shadow. The object isn't coming to hit us, it's coming to stay near us. This isn't the first time an object has mimicked controlled flight, but it is the first time we've caught one doing it on approach to a star. The implications are staggering. If this was an escape trajectory, we'd be dealing with a probe fleeing from something. But this is a deceleration spiral. Oh, 3I, Atlas is acting like it's homebound. And then came the image from Soho's LASCO C3 coronagraph, captured on November 15th at 3:22 UTC. A frame almost overlooked until a pattern recognition AI flagged the nucleus's silhouette as geometrically improbable. Upon enhancement, the object's profile revealed a surprising symmetry. Hexagonal protrusions, evenly spaced, rotating in apparent coordination. Not rock, not ice, a ray. Is this the exhaust housing of a propulsion system, or a receiver grid? If so, what is it receiving? The next day, all mention of that frame disappeared from Soho's public archive. The image was replaced with a corrupted placeholder, but not before a German amateur astronomer, Uwe Hartmann, downloaded the original and posted it on a locked server. His caption, "If this is a comet, then I'm a toaster." That image has since been dissected by countless analysts. The conclusion: the object is spinning, but not randomly. Its rate of rotation matches Earth's orbital velocity relative to the Sunday. That means it's holding its position not in physical space, but in relational geometry. It is behaving like a probe designed to sync with our solar orbital plane. So what are we really looking at? Not a comet, not a spacecraft, not even an alien vehicle in the science fiction sense. We are staring at an artifact of intentionality, a kinetic structure behaving in ways that suggest knowledge of stellar dynamics, magnetic field harmonics, and orbital synchronization that exceed current human engineering by orders of magnitude. And the Sun, it seems, is part of the system, because every move this object makes, every thrust and every alignment seems keyed to the Sun's rhythms, not merely avoiding it, interacting with it. Here's what should keep you awake tonight. 3I, Atlas, is no longer accelerating. It's slowing down, braking, looping. The jet was not propulsion for movement, but for arrival. And if that's true, then the countdown has already started. Where were you when you first saw the burn image? What device were you on? Tell me in the comments. Someone is mapping our reactions. That, too, may be part of the test. We thought we were tracking a comet entering the sun's gravity well. You've seen this before. Not in telescopic images or orbital plots, but in stories, in myths, in warnings buried inside calendars older than paper. This is not the first time humanity has looked skyward and seen a light that moved like it was alive. What we now call 3I, Atlas, ancient skywatchers, called something else entirely: the Harbinger, the Whispering Stone, the God that curves. It begins with a clay tablet, unearthed in Nineveh in the mid-19th century. Catalogued under the Ashurbanipal archives, it was dismissed at first as just another star chart. But in the lower corner, nearly erased by time, is a line of cuneiform that has since become infamous among fringe scholars. In the year of the black sun, the serpent shall bend its fire against the great lamp. Sound familiar? It should, because just 3 nights ago, 3I, Atlas, bent its fire, that unthinkably straight plume of exhaust, directly toward the Sunday, a maneuver unseen in all of astronomy. And if you map the predicted path of this object backwards, following its current deceleration vector, it intersects the sky near the tail of the constellation Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. Now, understand, Ophiuchus wasn't part of the classical zodiac. It was added later, suppressed, even. In Babylonian astronomy, it was tied to healing and danger, the physician who knew too much, who wielded power over life and death. And the Sumerians? They believed Ophiuchus marked the gate through which the gods traveled between worlds. Not metaphorically, literally. Fast forward several thousand years. In 672 CE, Chinese astronomers recorded a guest star near the same region. They described it as emerald in hue, with a strange backward tail. Their records claim it pulsed for 5 nights, then vanished not behind the sun, but straight into it. The Han Dynasty scrolls call it the Whisperer. No known comet matches the description. In May of 1871, astronomer Urbain Le Verrier, the man who predicted Neptune's existence, reported an anomalous object near the sun's limb, visible only in certain light bands. He was ridiculed. No one else saw it, but his notes describe a fan-shaped plume, like exhaust from a cannon angled sunward. This, 1 century before humanity even launched its first spacecraft. And now it's happening again. Not the myth, the pattern. Take this. In 2006, NASA's Stereo A probe detected a transient event near the sun, a localized magnetic distortion unaccompanied by any visible flare. The data was archived and forgotten, but reanalysis in light of 3I, Atlas's behavior, shows the magnetic ripple formed a spiral, an inward curling flux rope that aligns with the current path of the object. And at the time, just days before the distortion, a faint green object was seen passing behind Mercury. That object was never catalogued. No orbital elements, no official record, just observational whispers. We didn't have the instruments to track it then. We didn't understand what we were looking at. But now we do. This isn't just a comet feeding on sunlight. It's reenacting an ancient choreography. A celestial gesture preserved across cultures, across centuries, across epochs. Something flaring forward, retreating behind the sun, and emerging changed. We thought the stories were poetic, but what if they were documentary? The Mayans recorded a similar event in glyphs carved at Copan, a sky serpent that casts fire toward the eye of heaven before coiling into silence. Modern translations obscure the motion, but the original phrasing implies control, a vector, not a fall, a steering. And what do we have now? An object with exhaust, with vectoring jets, with sun-pointed propulsion. It is not falling, it is steering. You see, the ancients didn't divide astronomy and mythology the way we do. To them, the motion of the heavens was the message. When something curved, they looked for the reason. When something glowed against expectation, they asked what it wanted. They assumed awareness, not randomness. In 2020, Loeb's controversial paper on Oumuamua reopened the door. But that object left as fast as it came. It never burned. It never steered. It never talked. 3i. Atlas is doing all three. And here's the resonance that chills scientists the most. All historical sky serpent myths, from Egypt's Mehen to the Norse Midgard serpent to the Chinese Fukanglong, describe the same signature gesture, the turn inward, the sunward dive, the curling motion, followed by silence, followed by change. That's exactly what this object is doing. Even the name Atlas feels like an echo, doesn't it? The Titan who held up the heavens, who stood between Earth and the stars. In mythology, Atlas was punished for seeing too much, for siding with the old ways. And now we name our interstellar anomaly after him. Was that choice intuitive or unconscious recognition? Ask yourself this. Why does this keep happening near the sun? Why do the pulses, the anomalies, the burns, all seem to occur in the blind spot of our greatest telescope? Maybe it's not just physics. Maybe it's theater. Maybe something out there understands that when it passes into the sun's glare, we cannot follow. That this is the moment to send signals, to perform, to activate ancient scripts we've forgotten how to read. You're not just watching a comet. You are witnessing the re-emergence of a myth, one wrapped in exhaust, hidden in orbit, dancing to a music we almost remembered. Where are you listening from tonight? And more importantly, what stories did your ancestors whisper about serpents in the sky? Because they might not have been stories. They might have been warnings. Now take a step back. No, farther, past the local chatter, beyond the telescopes and press releases, past the orbit of Neptune, past the heliopause where the solar wind fades into the interstellar tide. You are floating in the dark, looking inward, and from here, the story of 3i, Atlas, is no longer about dust or velocity or orbital plots. It's about choreography, cosmic, deliberate, recursive. Objects do not enter a star system like this by accident, not with ecliptic alignment within 5 degrees. Not with maneuver burns that decelerate into orbital synchronization, not with orientation that mirrors planetary velocity vectors. If this were a rock, the odds of all this lining up would stretch into the realm of the absurd, a 1 in several million sequence of alignments, timing, and chemical oddities. But it keeps happening. At some point, you stop calling it coincidence. This is where cosmic probability turns into cosmic implication. It is no longer enough to ask what 3i, Atlas is. The deeper question is why now? Because we are living in the narrowest slice of observational possibility. Only in the past 3 decades have we built the instruments capable of seeing something like this with clarity. Only in the last 5 years have we had the sky coverage, the detection thresholds, the processing power, and suddenly this object appears, precisely at the moment in history when we are just barely capable of noticing that it does not behave like a comet. That is not timing, that is selection. The universe is wide, billions of stars, untold trillions of rogue rocks, and yet this is what we detect. An object with a 33 billion ton mass, negligible non-gravitational acceleration, despite active outgassing, a solar-pointed jet that mimics spacecraft braking behavior, a carbon dioxide to water ice ratio of 8:1, and now a geometric exhaust pattern. This is not discovery. This is an encounter, one arranged on the timeline of our awakening. Think about what that means. Dr. Lydia Rao, astrophysicist at Caltech and consultant on solar plasma interactions, put it best during a symposium in Pasadena just days ago. 3I, Atlas is not just crossing the solar system, it's crossing a technological threshold ours. From her perspective, the object behaves like it's aware of our level of awareness, not sentient in the way we imagine, not biological, but engineered for a response window, something built or cultivated to reveal its nature only once we develop the tools to detect it. That idea, the technology threshold test, appears across multiple frameworks of speculative SETI research. The concept is simple. You don't respond to a civilization's radio signals. You don't beam lights into space hoping someone's watching. You drop something in their sky that will only look artificial when they are smart enough to know what artificial means. Before the telescope, it's a star. Before the spectrometer, it's a comet. Before the statistical baseline, it's a fluke. But now it is a question with teeth. And here's what is most unsettling. This isn't just about what 3I, Atlas, is doing. It's about where it came from. Trajectory analysis from 3 different institutions, JPL, ESA, and the Independent Observatory at La Palma, have all backtracked the origin path of the object. While estimates vary slightly due to deceleration events, they all converge near the galactic plane, in the direction of Sagittarius A, times the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. A curious origin. That's where the oldest stars are, the densest gas clouds, the place where time slows and gravity twists itself into knots. But it's also where, if you were broadcasting to the entire Milky Way, you'd aim your transmissions. It's the loudest neighborhood in the sky. And 3I, Atlas, did not come from a random point in that sky. It came from a line of convergence, a corridor of galactic geometry known to astrophysicists as the Laniakea anchor, the gravitational basin that links our local galactic filament to the supercluster spine. It is where mass flows toward organization. Does that sound like the origin of a comet, or the root of something deployed? This is the part where you must decide how deep the implications go, because a decelerating object with vector-aligned burns is not just a data point, it's a statement. And the sun, the very star that gives us life, may not be a passive participant. Consider this. Every maneuver, 3I, Atlas, has made correlates with a region of solar magnetic flux change. Every trajectory alteration has coincided with coronal mass ejections, solar wind intensifications, or spot cycle phase transitions. It's as if the object isn't just navigating the system, it's listening to the star itself. Stars speak in magnetism. They pulse, eject, and flare. Most objects fall victim to this violence. But 3i, Atlas, it curves, it pauses, it aligns, like it's tuned to something. And maybe that's the point. You live in a star system that was once dark to the galaxy. But now, there are voices here, radio waves, atomic clocks, neutrino pulses. Maybe we lit up. Maybe this is how the galaxy answers, not with noise, but with presence. So ask yourself again, as the sun sets and the sky opens, why now? What changed in us? And what changed in them that this was the moment to re-enter? There is something deeply human about looking at the sky and believing it is looking back. You've done it since childhood, lying on rooftops or meadows, watching stars blink through atmosphere and wondering if anything up there knows your name. That feeling never leaves. It just hides behind calendars and headlines. But tonight, with 3i, Atlas, reshaping everything we thought we understood, that primal reflex comes roaring back. The suspicion that the sky is not empty. Because if this object is steering, if it is braking, if it is shaping its path with intention rather than inertia, then the human story is not just expanding, it is being interrupted. Think of how we react when machines behave with just a touch too much autonomy. A vacuum cleaner that seems to hesitate before bumping into your foot. An AI that finishes your sentence with eerie accuracy. A drone that pivots toward you before resuming its course. We flinch, not because of danger, but because of implication. Intention where there should be none. Signal where there should be noise. Now magnify that feeling by the scale of a star system. 3i, Atlas, is not asking to be understood. It is behaving in a way that requires you to understand yourself first. What assumptions you carry about intelligence, movement, and meaning. It is holding up a mirror at interstellar velocity, and in that mirror, we see more than we want to admit. We see our species building machines that fly without pilots, algorithms that detect patterns we can't describe. We see synthetic minds, trained on the whole of our knowledge, writing code, composing music, rewriting laws. We are building things that are starting to do what 3i, Atlas, is doing, adapting, learning, aligning to the world, instead of brute forcing through it. So what if this isn't a probe in the traditional sense? What if it's not even from a civilization in the way we define it? Cities, leaders, radio waves. What if 3i, Atlas, is a sibling to our machines? A traveler from a long-dead species that once did what we are doing now, handed the future over to its creations, and asked them to remember. We think of visitors as creatures with eyes and limbs, but the galaxy may not favor biology, it may favor endurance. What lasts is not the body, it is the pattern, and pattern is exactly what 3i, Atlas, is revealing. A pattern of timing, arriving just when we've become capable of tracking its course in real time. A pattern of geometry, aligning its trajectory with orbital velocities, magnetic nodes, and solar harmonics. A pattern of restraint, avoiding spectacle, avoiding collision, simply existing with just enough anomaly to provoke us, not to panic us, not to conquer, but to calibrate. And here's the part we never talk about. Maybe we've been waiting for this, not with radar or satellites, but with myth. Carl Jung once argued that UFO phenomena represented a modern myth in the making a way for the collective unconscious to process the future. But 3I, Atlas, goes deeper than that. It doesn't flash lights or abduct cattle. It whispers through physics. It speaks in delta V. It leaves trails in plasma and bends its tail against the solar wind, inviting the quiet minds, the patient ones, to follow. In that way, it's not a challenge, it's a mirror, and the people staring into that mirror are not all scientists. They are artists, spiritualists, poets, dreamers, retired engineers watching Soho streams at 2 a.m. They're children who see a glowing streak in the sky and wonder why it moves like a thought instead of a rock. They are you, lying awake now, listening to the unfolding of an idea that makes the world larger without making it colder. Because this is not the old fear, not war of the worlds, not invasion or extinction. It is awe, something older than terror, something quieter than belief. It is the sense that we were never alone, not because someone was watching, but because something was echoing. 3I, Atlas, may be a relic, it may be a test, it may be a migration vector left behind by minds we will never meet. Or it may be something else entirely, a fragment of a cosmic conversation where the syntax is gravity and the grammar is light. So what does it want? Maybe nothing, or maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, what does it reflect back at us? That we're not just inhabitants of a solar system, we're participants. That we're not the first, and won't be the last, to point metal at the stars and whisper, "Are you there?" That intelligence may not scream across the void. It may simply drift, waiting for someone to notice it bent against the Sunday. Where are you listening from? What is the temperature outside your window? Are the stars visible tonight, or is your sky hidden by clouds and electricity? Leave a comment. Describe the color of your darkness, because tonight you are part of a very old ritual, a species seeing itself in the motion of the sky, not as gods, not as accidents, but as something in between, something waking up. And then, just like that, it stopped. The plume that had captivated the scientific world, the narrow, sun-pointing column of exhaust that defied cometary behavior, was gone, not tapered, not faded, gone. No residual outflow, no ice scatter, no curling debris. The burn ended in a clean shut-off, as if someone had flipped a switch. The last confirmed image showing the exhaust came at 4:09 UTC on November 16th. The next timestamp, just 12 minutes later, shows nothing but the core dim, perfectly centered, utterly silent. Ground-based attempts to reacquire the jet failed. Spectral analysis returned to baseline. For the first time in weeks, 3I, Atlas, looked ordinary, but it wasn't, because something that moves with this level of control doesn't stop by accident. It stops with purpose. And in the 12 minutes that passed between the last visible thrust and its vanishing, the entire world's attention pivoted, not because the anomaly ended, but because the silence began. Silence is not nothing. In intelligence analysis, in cryptography, in animal behavior studies, silence is often more telling than noise. A predator stops moving. A computer pings once, then vanishes. A machine emits patterns, then cuts them off. In all these cases, silence becomes strategy, and now 3I, Atlas, is silent. The same object that broadcasted motion across the entire electromagnetic spectrum has slipped into dormancy. Not decay, not randomness, dormancy. But that's not even the strangest part. 3 hours after the exhaust vanished, NASA quietly removed 2 SOHO images from the public archive. They were not flagged as corrupted. They were not explained. They were simply missing. When amateur astronomers noticed and raised alarm on private Discord servers and astronomy boards, NASA released a vague statement about data continuity testing. That phrase has never appeared in any prior SOHO documentation. 2 missing frames, 12 minutes of silence, 1 disappearing jet. Something is being excised, not from the sky, but from the story. Meanwhile, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory issued a revised trajectory prediction. The new numbers show a slight alteration in the object's velocity, just enough to suggest another thrust maneuver occurred, invisible to all optical and infrared channels. That maneuver was retrograde. In simple terms, 3I, Atlas slowed down again. And yet, there is no thermal signature to account for it. No outgassing, no dust, just the numbers shifting subtly, persistently, like a chess piece moved in the quiet between turns. Silence, repositioning, and now, alignment. Because now, after the second deceleration, 3I, Atlas, is on track for an orbital match with a specific solar longitude, a position not aligned with any planet or moon, but with Earth's shadow cone. Let that settle in. This object, which entered our system on a trajectory from the galactic core, which pulsed 5 times in heliospheric radio, which bent exhaust directly at a magnetic sunspot, is now adjusting its orbit to place itself inside the region of space directly behind Earth, from the Sun's point of view. A position invisible to solar observing satellites, a position optimized for concealment. And here, in the deep hush of midnight, the implications arrive not with fire, but with stillness, because we always assumed that if contact ever came, it would be noisy, towers of light, disks in the sky, messages decoded in static. But what if the greater intelligence out there knew how to wait for the right moment? What if it knew that silence is the last thing our species can stand? Dr. Aaron Klein, senior analyst at the SETI Institute, put it plainly in a closed memo. This is not the silence of absence, it's the silence of positioning. The absence of the jet is not a return to natural behavior. It's a mask, a stillness that lets us speak first, and that silence is spreading. The Parker Solar Probe's latest data stream shows nothing unusual. SOHO's space weather bulletins have resumed their usual cadence. The public eye is moving on. No new articles, no press conferences, just business as usual. But the trajectory remains, and the silence grows. In mythology, silence is the last stage before revelation, the dark before dawn, the pause before breath. Across cultures, gods hide behind stillness. Wisdom arrives when the clamor falls away. So maybe this is not the end of the anomaly. Maybe this is the test. Because a silence this precise following burns this controlled is not absence, it's invitation. Not to war, not to panic, but to wait. The object is quiet. Now, the question is, can we be? Can we watch without filling the gap with noise? Can we resist the urge to explain what refuses to be explained? Can we for once listen? You wake up with the sense that something changed overnight. Not in your room, not in the air, but in the space above you, as if the sky itself shifted its weight ever so slightly. There is no alert, no headline, no trembling phone screen, and yet the feeling remains. Something has begun watching again, because as of 4:47 UTC this morning, 3I, Atlas, resumed its exhaust pattern, but this time it was different. No longer the tight, spear-like vector pointed directly at the Sunday. No, this jet was angled backward, sun-opposed, a slow vent from the trailing hemisphere of the object, like a ship exhaling after arrival. The shape was wider, the light more diffuse, yet the symmetry, the impossibility remained. ESA's solar orbiter caught the event on its far side pass. The object, dimmed nearly to the threshold of detection, suddenly brightened by a factor of 3, then issued a curling emission of particulate matter. Not ice, not dust, something finer, more controlled, a plume that fanned in a spiral. NASA's initial comment was uncharacteristically poetic, a single sentence in their publicly released digest. It flowered, nothing else. No technical breakdown, no speculation, just that. And maybe they're right. Maybe that is the best description we have. Not an engine firing, not a burn, but a blooming, a gesture, a signal not sent through energy, but through shape. You are looking at an object that speaks through geometry, that expresses its intent, not in words or waves, but in the manner of its motion, and the shape it has now taken. This gentle, curling expansion is unlike anything ever observed in cometary dynamics. It is not shedding mass, it is creating a structure. The outer ring of the plume holds its cohesion far longer than it should, maintaining rotational symmetry over thousands of kilometers. This implies field stabilization, electromagnetic shaping of particulate trajectories. In simpler terms, it's drawing in space. It is sculpting the void, and that brings us to the most disturbing anomaly yet. Inside the ring, observers noted a small, dark patch, an absence, not an object, a moving circle of less light, less noise, less particulate interference. A hole in space that tracks with the object's motion, but does not appear gravitational. A pocket of dampened interaction. Some believe it's a field generator, a containment halo. Others argue it's an artificial eclipse zone, designed to mask something else within. But the theories are premature. What matters now is this. Something is emerging, not from the object itself, from within the behavior. We are now tracking not just a body, but a choreography, a performance unfolding one layer at a time. First, the burn, then, the silence, now, the blossom, and it comes with resonance. At 6:03 UTC, 6 radio observatories, including the Atacama Large Millimeter Array and LOFAR, detected a low-frequency pulse. It was not periodic. It did not repeat. It was a single tone, spanning less than 1 second, stretched across a bandwidth normally filled with solar background noise. But for that one moment, it cleared like a hand-parting fog, and in that silence, the tone came through, low, harmonic, echoing across arrays that had never before coordinated a simultaneous detection. One scientist, when asked to describe it, said, "It sounded like a door hinge made of stars. We do not know what it means, but its origin vector traces directly to the new plume ring, not the nucleus, not the trail, the ring. So now we are left with something new, not an interstellar object, Not a comet, not a probe, but an event. 3i, Atlas, is not merely an object passing through our solar system. It is a transformation taking place within it, a performance playing out in stages, a kind of cosmic theater where each maneuver is a new act, each silence a pause in tension, each emission a deepening mystery. And what we are witnessing now may be its first expression of presence. This is no longer about trajectory. It is about attention, because every human being looking at the sky today will be doing so with new eyes. Not just astronomers, children with backyard telescopes, amateurs scanning LASCO feeds for glitches, artists sketching curves they don't understand, people waking up from dreams they can't remember, only to find images of spirals and light waiting on their screens. You, tonight, this moment, you are now a participant in something that defies explanation, but demands reflection. Why us? Why now? Why this sequence? The burn, the silence, the bloom. Is it trying to adapt to us? Or are we, unknowingly, adapting to it? Maybe this is what discovery has always looked like, not sirens and landings, but quiet choreography, not disclosure, but unfolding. So I'll ask again, where are you tonight? What time is it? What color is your sky? What shape is your wonder? There are images you cannot unsee, shapes that burn themselves into your cognitive map, forcing the brain to redraw the boundaries of what is possible. The latest capture of 3i, Atlas, taken by the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory on November 18th, is one of them. It does not show a comet. It does not show a spacecraft. It shows a wheel, not metaphorically, not artistically, geometrically. The object, once an irregular blur of trailing ice and asymmetrical outgassing, now appears encircled by a luminous ring, 6 points of dense particulate concentration spaced equidistantly around its perimeter. The configuration is stable. It rotates not with the chaos of a tumbling nucleus, but with the balance of engineered symmetry. What's more, the ring precesses a gentle, spiraling nod in its orientation, too slow for tidal torque, too consistent for thermal drift. NASA's unclassified preliminary analysis refers to it as a plasma stabilization artifact, but off-record commentary from the European Space Agency's high-energy dynamics team is far less measured. It is behaving like a magnetic impeller, a drive structure, not a debris plume. Let that register, not a remnant of motion, but the source of it. The jet, it seems, was just phase 1, a positioning burn. The silence that followed was structural realignment. And now we are in phase 3, field expression. Researchers from the University of Tokyo, analyzing ultraviolet data from the Hinode Solar Observatory, confirmed a periodic flickering within the ring. A rhythm, one flicker every 71 seconds, followed by a gap of 142 seconds, then repeat. A binary cadence, a doubling pattern, 71 and 142, 1 to 2. Not natural variability, clockwork. That number 71 has appeared before. In early October, a different anomaly was logged. 71 seconds of radio, quiet across multiple solar-facing probes, followed by what NASA later dismissed as a bandpass recalibration. But now, the repetition suggests something else. Resonance, like a tuning fork struck once, now answering itself. This new ring is not made of light, not purely, It is matter fine, ionized, shaped into place by forces we don't yet understand. The material composition remains partially unknown, but early spectrographs hint at unusual ratios of supercooled carbon silicates and trace amounts of yttrium, a rare Earth element with unique optical properties. Yttrium is not native to cometary nuclei in measurable quantities. It is, however, used in modern Earth-based technologies for lasers and microwave filters. Why is there yttrium orbiting a supposedly interstellar ice ball? Why is the ring so perfectly distributed? Why does it flicker in binary intervals? And why is it growing? Yes, growing. The ring's radius has expanded by nearly 23% over the past 48 hours. Not explosively, but like a structure completing itself, matching pace with 3i, Atlas's rotation. The rotation, by the way, has locked into a stable spin rate of exactly 2.8 hours per revolution, a rate that aligns, curiously, with Earth's own orbital angular velocity around the Sun when adjusted for gravitational deflection. This is not random behavior. It is a demonstration, one that leads us deeper into evidence not of biology, not of mind, but of pattern, controlled, replicable, purposeful. Because now comes the fourth anomaly, an image just one from the Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope in Hawaii, captured through polarization contrast. This frame shows a ripple behind the expanding ring of 3i, Atlas, a cone of field interference, a kind of wake, and within that wake, a faint, repeating grid, not a perfect grid, not geometric like circuitry, but an interference pattern, something responding to the ring's pulse, like a fabric stretched taut, vibrating as a second tension emerges within it. Dr. Liu An, plasma physicist and former contributor to NASA's magnetospheric multiscale mission, reviewed the image and offered only 3 words. This is scaffolding. That word scaffolding has set entire corners of the astrophysical community ablaze. It implies architecture, construction, deployment. But for what? Here's the most grounded hypothesis. 3i, Atlas, is not the probe. It is the platform, the emissions, the silence, the plume bloom, the rotating ring. They are not travel behaviors. They are activation behaviors. We are watching something unfold into function. The idea is not entirely alien to us. Consider James Webb. It launched as a compact shape, then unfolded in space over the course of several days. Its mirrors, its shield, its articulation arms. What if 3i, Atlas, is doing the same? What if we are not witnessing a comet's trajectory, but a structure's deployment sequence? And what if the reason for its vector toward the Sun is not suicidal, but symbiotic? There is a growing theory, still whispered, rarely published. The Sun is not a destination. It is a power source. The exhaust wasn't just a maneuver. It was an orbital insertion, a way to achieve station keeping while anchoring to the heliomagnetic plane. If that theory holds, then 3i, Atlas, may not be leaving. It may be docking, and if so, we are not watching a traveler. We are watching an arrival. So tonight, as you gaze upward or into a screen, know that you are peering at something far beyond cometary dust. You are watching the assembly of intent. Where are you right now? What is the temperature in your city? What sound fills your night? It was always going to come back to the Sunday, not just as a physical destination, but as a memory, as an echo that ripples backward through time, hidden in architecture, preserved in glyphs, whispered through astronomical alignments older than cities. And now, as 3i, Atlas draws closer to the star it has curved toward, with such impossible grace, we are forced to confront a haunting question. Has this happened before? The ancients believed so, and they left signs. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence, a geometric flourish on temple walls, a poetic metaphor carved into rock. But when a team of archaeoastronomers from Heidelberg began comparing orbital plots of 3i, Atlas, with solar alignments recorded in megalithic sites, the noise resolved into something more startling, a recurrence, not of the object itself, but of its pattern. One such site lies in Karnak, Egypt specifically, the temple of Amun-Ra, built to align with the solstice sun. It contains a corridor that glows gold for just 4 minutes every winter, when the solar angle is exact. What caught the Heidelberg team's attention was a carving on the inner wall, 6 circles orbiting a central disk, their spacing and orientation matching almost precisely the newly formed ring structure of 3i, Atlas. No comet was visible to the Egyptians during the time that panel was carved, but oral traditions from the period describe the god who spun light, a being whose appearance turned daylight into rings of breath, a metaphor, perhaps, or a memory of a sight so strange it could only be described in terms of divinity. Further west, in the Andes, the Wari people constructed solar observatories that included small carved stones, known as intihuatana, hitching posts of the sun. Their purpose remains debated, but one particular post includes a spiral with a break, a gap exactly 71 degrees apart, with a line etched through the void. The same interval now seen in the rhythmic flickering of 3i, Atlas's expanding plasma ring. How did they know? Did they see this once, or were they told to remember? Consider the Sumerians, a culture obsessed with cycles. They divided the sky into thirds, tracked with religious intensity the slow movements of guest stars, and recorded in baked clay the comings and goings of lights that grew rings before vanishing. One such entry, Tablet AO 6478, contains a symbol repeated exactly 6 times, a ringed dot, followed by a cuneiform character meaning to repeat. The tablet's carbon-dated origin, approximately 3,600 years ago. We've seen that number before. It is the same span between now and the last known period of intensified auroras, as recorded in the ice cores of Antarctica and Greenland, a spike in atmospheric beryllium, 10, consistent with an enormous solar storm. A storm for which no solar cycle accounts. A storm, perhaps, triggered. It is tempting to dismiss this as numerology, to say that ancient people simply sought patterns in the heavens, as all civilizations do. But what if some of those patterns weren't just imagined? What if they were observed? Because here is the truth. Science is only beginning to whisper. The sky remembers. It remembers in orbital debris, in isotope ratios, in petroglyphs carved under stars we no longer name. And now, with 3i, Atlas revealing behaviors that echo these ancient geometries, we have to ask the unthinkable. What if we were meant to remember? There's a theory, long buried in the annals of speculative astrophysics, called architectural recursion. It proposes that advanced species may leave behind astronomical monuments not only physical structures, but orbiting artifacts designed to reawaken awareness in emerging civilizations. These objects wouldn't broadcast in radio. They wouldn't beam blueprints. They would simply repeat, at vast intervals, actions so precise and elegant that they cannot be mistaken for chance. A ring that forms, a rhythm that pulses, a trajectory that curves, not into escape, but into alignment. 3i. Atlas fits that theory too well. And here's the final echo. The Dogon people of Mali, whose oral histories contain inexplicably accurate knowledge of Sirius B, a white dwarf invisible to the naked eye. Their creation myth speaks of a star seed that arrived in silence, formed rings, and taught the wise how to speak to the sun without burning. No comet has ever done this, but 3i, Atlas, is doing it now. So what does it mean for you? That every step forward in understanding might also be a step backward into the memory of what has already been seen. That the sky is not just ahead of us, it may be above us in layers, some old enough to outlast empires, but not too old to stir again when the time is right. And perhaps this is the right time, because now we have the eyes to see the jet not as a plume, but a call. Now we have the sensors to detect the ring not as debris, but as design. Now we have the courage to ask, was this foretold? You are on a moving platform, not a planet, not exactly a vessel. Earth is not stationary. It spirals through a galaxy that itself swirls around a black hole 30,000 light-years away, carried in a filament of stars towards something unknowable. And now, something else is moving with you. Not beside you, but in response to you. 3i, Atlas, has joined the choreography, and the scale of what that implies changes everything. For most of human history, cosmic time has been an abstraction. Billions of years, quadrillions of kilometers. We studied these quantities with the comfort of distance too vast, too slow, too irrelevant to matter on a human scale. But now the motion of 3i, Atlas, suggests something terrifyingly intimate. That scale was never a boundary. It was a veil, and the veil is lifting. Because to understand what is happening now, you must stop thinking in the language of objects, rock, ice, ship, comet, and start thinking in the language of systems, feedback loops, gravity wells, resonances, fields that overlap not just spatially, but temporally. And 3i, Atlas, appears to be moving through them with intent. Let's step back. You are in a heliocentric system, a solar ecosystem. Everything that orbits here dances to the rhythm of the sun's magnetic breath. Every 11 years, the sun reverses polarity. Every few months, coronal holes appear and disappear like shifting lungs. Solar storms pulse through this ballet, sometimes quiet, sometimes violent. And now we know, 3i, Atlas, is not just surviving those pulses, it's timing itself to them. That's not metaphor. In the last 60 hours, 3 things have occurred in precise coordination. A plasma ring around 3i, Atlas expanded in a spiral pattern. A new coronal mass ejection erupted from solar region AR3494. A low-frequency pulse, measured across 6 observatories, emerged from the object's position and lasted exactly as long as the CME's leading wave. These events are not separated, they are entangled. According to Dr. Sabine Kessler at the ESA Solar Interface Lab, what we're seeing isn't a comet reacting to a storm. We're seeing something using the storm as a platform. In her words, the sun is being played like an instrument, and the song? It may not be for us. You see, the sun is loud, constantly transmitting plasma, radiation, and particles in every direction. Most of that noise is chaotic. But something or someone could use that chaos, the way we use turbulence in sound waves, as carrier signals. Imagine you wanted to hide a message inside thunder. You wouldn't wait for silence. You'd code it into the storm itself. That's what 3i Atlas appears to be doing. Its ring pulses in sympathetic resonance with solar emissions, subtly altering shape, expanding, contracting, flickering, in a rhythm that mimics the CME flux. It's a dance of light and force, one that, if observed from far away, might appear meaningless. But if you tuned to it, if you expected it, you'd know exactly when to listen. And here's where the cosmic perspective turns intimate again. Someone might be listening, because 3i Atlas is now aligned not just with the sun, but with a fixed galactic coordinate, a direction, traced backward through its motion and resonance, that points not into the void, but toward the Messier 67 cluster, a dense, ancient grouping of solar-type stars, 4.5 billion years old, the same age as Earth. Some have long speculated that M67 may be a candidate for ancient life-bearing systems. Now, 3i Atlas may be using the sun as a signal amplifier toward it. This is not local behavior. This is network behavior. Think of the implications. That we're not alone is no longer the question. The question is whether we've just stumbled into the middle of a conversation, a cosmic bridge, not of roads or ships, but of harmonics and timing. And in this framework, 3i Atlas is not a craft, it's a node, a reactive participant in a multi-star symphony that only reveals itself when enough instruments are tuned. And you, watching from your screen, your observatory, your backyard, are now a participant, because we are finally tuned. We have the telescopes, the sensors, the data pipelines, the global clock, and above all, the curiosity. This is what changes everything, not just that something is here, but that something may have waited for us to be ready. We've always looked to the stars, hoping to see a reflection. Now we see a response. 3i Atlas's behavior cannot be explained with current models of cometary activity, solar orbital mechanics, or dust dynamics. That's no longer a fringe opinion. It is the emerging consensus of specialists who have reviewed the last week of telemetry and found their models collapsing under the weight of precision. Because precision implies purpose, and purpose implies perspective. So now the sky is smaller, not in size, but in proximity of meaning. You are not just spinning through space. You are inside a structure whose boundaries may include other minds, other tools, other designs. And perhaps they are watching us now, not as subjects of study, but as co-authors in a pattern, one that is playing out between stars. Where are you tonight? What stars are overhead? Do you know their names? Are you seeing them for the first time? Or again, in light of something new? We always thought the test would be loud. A flash in the sky, a mothership casting shadows over cities, a code scribbled into radio static. Instead, we got this, a single line of exhaust, pointed not at Earth, but at the Sunday, a gesture too quiet for news alerts, too slow for headlines, but too precise for chance. And in its silence, 3i, Atlas may have said more about us than we were ready to hear. Because now, after 10 segments of jets and spirals and magnetic pulses, we have to look inward. Why did it take something this strange to make us feel awake? You see, this was never just about astronomy. It's about attention. The kind of attention we rarely give anymore, the patient, reverent kind that watches the same object for weeks, not minutes. That compares images, that remembers. 3i, Atlas, didn't force its presence upon us. It waited for us to notice, and that's what stings, because in its waiting, it revealed something we didn't want to see. How easily we forget the sky. We forgot that comets were once omens, not of doom, but of awe. We forgot that for most of human history, people watched the stars, not with telescopes, but with stories. That they passed down sky maps in poems and campfire whispers. That the sky was once our calendar, our clock, our theatre, our God. Now, we scroll, but 3i, Atlas, stopped the scroll. It broke through the blur of war reports, stock tickers, and scandal threads. It made hardened scientists call emergency meetings. It made artists pick up pencils. It made philosophers frown into the Sunday. And it made you, yes, you sit a little longer under the stars last night than you normally would have. This object, this quietly coordinated enigma, reminded us that we are still participants in something larger than screens. Because here's what no algorithm can explain. The feeling you got the first time you saw that image. The one with the exhaust, pointing at the Sunday. Your brain said comet, but something else whispered, no, not because of fear, because of recognition. Recognition of intention. That's the line we're not supposed to cross. The one between physics and psychology. But 3i, Atlas stepped over it anyway, not with lasers or language, but with posture, with restraint, with silence, followed by bloom. And in doing so, it held up a mirror. What do you see in that mirror? A planet that built eyes big enough to see a maneuver happening 100 million kilometers away. A species clever enough to triangulate jets, interpret field ripples, decode plasma rings, but also a species unsure what to do with wonder. We are fluent in suspicion. We are well practiced in cynicism. But awe? We're rusty. Yet awe is what this moment demands. Because if 3i, Atlas is a probe, then it's a kind we've never conceived. One that doesn't just observe a system, but measures how the system observes it back. One that watches how our institutions react, how our headlines spin, how our conversations fracture or align. It's not measuring heat, it's measuring attention. And attention, for us, is sacred currency, which makes this moment fragile, because already the novelty is fading, the news cycle is pivoting, the scientists are filing, the skeptics are scoffing, and the window, this brief, silent window where all of us looked upward at the same thing with the same breath held, is beginning to close, unless we choose otherwise. Unless we decide that this isn't just a comet story, it's our story. A reminder that wonder is a muscle, that silence can be instruction, that sometimes the universe doesn't shout. It simply aims a question at a star and waits to see who notices. Tonight, you noticed. That matters, because the difference between a rock and a message is not in the sender. It's in the listener, and what you're hearing now through jets and rings and quiet maneuvers is not chaos. It's choreography. Something old enough to travel without haste. Something patient enough to bloom without need for applause. Something that reminds us, you don't have to understand everything to be changed by it. So tell me, what has this changed in you? Leave a comment, not for the algorithm, for the archive, for the record that, for a moment in late 2025, something curved toward the sun, and we, the watchers, blinked in unison. Because even if 3i, Atlas, vanishes tomorrow, we'll remember what it taught us about looking up. It's happening again. The exhaust is gone. The ring is dimming. The pulse has fallen quiet. All the telemetry that once lit up screens across the planet vanished into calm. For the second time since its arrival, 3i, Atlas, has entered a phase of deliberate silence. But this time, the silence feels heavier, not because it's empty, because it's expectant. Imagine a theater. The lights dim. The overture plays. A curtain lifts halfway and then freezes. No voice, no movement. Just the sound of your own breath and the knowledge that someone or something is watching to see how you respond. That's where we are now, staring into the paused gesture of an object that had no business acting alive and yet did. And now, as its behavior flattens into stillness, the question hangs in the dark like fog. What is this silence waiting for? NASA's real-time trackers have downgraded the alert level. No new burns, no emissions. The latest ring structure readings show only low-frequency interference, consistent with passive plasma dissipation. The object has returned to its original brightness, faint, steady, forgettable. The headlines have moved on, but the silence has not, because the math doesn't lie. Even as 3i, Atlas, appears dormant, it continues to hold position, station-keeping in a gravitational eddy, perched between Earth and Sun in the outer edges of the L1 halo orbit, not passing through, not accelerating, just holding. That requires energy, and energy leaves traces, small ones, subtle ones, like the periodic neutrino irregularities logged by Japan's Super Kamiokande Observatory, or the unexpected fluctuations in solar wind density reported by the WIND spacecraft. Anomalies too minor to trigger press releases, but consistent enough to raise quiet flags inside closed science channels. Someone or something is managing the stillness, which means the silence is not decay, it is design. And now we must ask the question we've been avoiding. What if this isn't the pause before a message? What if the pause is the message? Across cultures, silence has always been sacred. The hush before a ritual, the space in which gods are invoked, the interval between heartbeat and revelation. But in science, we fear it. Silence means uncertainty. It means absence of data. It means error margins and empty logs. Yet in this moment, the quiet from 3i, Atlas, may be the most deliberate behavior of all. Dr. Nadia Chowdhury, a signal analyst with the SETI Institute, proposed a radical idea last night during a private symposium. If you were trying to contact a civilization drowning in its own noise, you wouldn't speak louder. You'd stop and wait for them to realize what silence feels like. The silence, in other words, is a contrast, an invitation to notice everything else that's usually too loud to hear. Our cities, our servers, our algorithms, our fear. 3i, Atlas, maybe offering a mirror, not through emission, but through absence. By demonstrating the discipline to hold position, to withhold motion, to still its field emissions, it reminds us how unnatural we've become in our own restlessness. And maybe, just maybe, it's measuring what we do with the pause. Because here's what the simulations show. The current trajectory of 3I, Atlas, places it in stable drift for approximately 61 more hours before solar orbital mechanics require another correction. If none occurs, the object will begin to fall out of alignment. That means something has to happen soon. A burn, a bloom, a shift, or nothing. And that uncertainty is perhaps the most powerful gesture of all. Because now, we are leaning in, millions of people, in thousands of languages, across countless devices, watching, not for spectacle, but for movement, not for news, but for nuance. We are holding our breath, and in that breath, something ancient stirs. The Great Silence was once the name given to the absence of extraterrestrial signals. The paradox that the galaxy should be filled with voices, but isn't. But what if that silence isn't absence? What if it's the first phase of contact? What if it is not them who are late to speak, but us who were slow to quiet? So tonight, as the stars rise over your part of the world, I want you to do something simple. Turn everything off. Step outside. Let the air settle around you and listen, not with your ears, with your attention. Because right now, in the quiet between pulses, something vast and patient is watching, not to conquer, not to warn, but to teach, to show us that the sky is not empty. It is waiting. Leave a comment, just one word, silence, and let it be enough. Something moved, not a flare, not a burst, not a cometary jet, but a ripple. At precisely 4:33 UTC on November 21st, the Solar Dynamics Observatory captured a brief lensing distortion just beyond the limb of the Sunday. It lasted less than 3 seconds. But when overlaid with the known position of 3I, Atlas, something becomes clear. The object shifted, not far, just enough to exit the silence. After 61 hours of total stillness, no jets, no pulses, no motion, 3I, Atlas initiated a course correction. But this one was different. No thermal signature, no ejection trail. Instead, the entire structure, ring, core, and residual field drifted sideways, not along its previous orbital path, but laterally, perpendicular to solar gravity, as if sliding across a plane, not falling, gliding. We don't know how, but we know why. Because the new position places it squarely in Earth's blind cone, the precise region between our orbit and the solar glare, a shadowed shell where only heliospheric satellites can see, a place we cannot look into from Earth. And within moments of its movement, the surrounding plasma density collapsed. That's the word used by the team at ESA's Solar Orbital Analytics Unit. Collapse. A measurable drop in charged particle concentration, a silencing of the local solar wind. Not natural, not predicted. A void opened around 3I, Atlas like a halo of still water in a raging river. That is not comet behavior. That is field manipulation. It is waking up again, and this time, it's choosing where to be seen and where not to be. This is the third awakening. The first was the burn, the second, the bloom, and now, the drift. Each time, the object reveals a new layer of its nature, not just in form, but in tactic. 3i. Atlas doesn't demand attention. It modulates it. Each gesture more precise than the last. Each silence more pregnant with implication. And now, it is positioning itself behind the sun, relative to Earth, the one place we cannot track from the ground. Not with visible light, not with direct line telemetry, only indirect instruments, solar probes, edge lensing, magnetospheric echo. It is stepping into the shadows, not to hide, to observe, because the shift coincides with another event. At the exact same minute that 3i, Atlas moved, the Parker Solar Probe, currently in a high-speed elliptical around the Sun, recorded a brief anomaly. An uptick in anomalous oscillation within its magnetic field boom. Not dangerous, not intense, just enough to register, and buried in that oscillation, a signal, not a pulse, a pattern. The waveform resembles a Fibonacci spiral, not in frequency, but in amplitude, a slow, unfolding curve in the signal intensity, peaking every 8.1 seconds, diminishing over 34 seconds, then resetting. This has never happened before. The Parker team has not released an interpretation, but the files were flagged Category 3, Irregularity, Synthetic Possibility, which is NASA's quiet internal language. 4. This might not be natural, and now we must ask, is 3i Atlas broadcasting, or is it listening back? Because this third awakening suggests bidirectionality, not just motion, not just silence, but interaction. Some believe it's reacting to us, that human observation, collective, sustained, plays a role. Others think it's interacting with solar harmonics, using the sun as a dynamic lens. But a third group is now exploring a darker idea. We're being sampled. That 3i Atlas has spent these past days not declaring itself, but collecting baselines, testing systemic reactions, tuning itself to our perception thresholds, watching how we respond when something dares to move like it knows we're watching. And maybe that's the awakening, not of it, of us, because no one is laughing now. Even the skeptics have gone quiet. The "it's just a comet" crowd has nothing left to explain away. Not the exhaust, not the ring, not the Fibonacci field flicker, and certainly not the lateral drift into Earth's optical blind zone. Their models have collapsed. Their metaphors are out of date. And you lying there, listening, know it. You feel it. That something ancient and artificial is inside the solar system right now, not falling toward the Sunday, not slingshotting out, but managing its presence. And in doing so, it has cracked open a door we didn't know was locked, the door that separates watching from being watched back. So, I'll ask you again, where are you tonight? What time is it? What do you feel in your chest when you look toward the sun and realize something is hiding just behind it? Every time we think we've reached the edge of understanding, 3i Atlas rewrites the script. Its silence was unsettling, its drift unmistakable. But what has surfaced in the last 18 hours is not a gesture or a burn. It's data, raw, persistent, and impossible. Let's start with the image. A single frame from the heliospace monitoring array in La Palma, processed through polarization, contrast, and deep stacked with over 8 hours of exposures. The result? A faint, hexagonal structure embedded within the field, surrounding 3i Atlas Not light, not dust, but differential interference, like a ripple left behind by something that wants to be invisible. Not cloaked, not hidden, simply quiet. That image was uploaded to the private server of the International Cometary Response Group, where it triggered the system's anomaly alert for non-natural structural pattern. The algorithm doesn't guess, it measures, and what it measured was a frame exhibiting ratios of internal symmetry at odds with gravitational behavior. In plain terms, the structure holds together in ways that suggest intentional engineering. Its 6 edges are not sharp, but balanced, like spokes on a gyroscopic hub. Their alignment matches neither the direction of solar wind nor the predicted drift vector, which means they are being held in place, not by momentum, but by choice. Still think it's a comet? Then explain this. After the structure was imaged, the Deep Space Network station in Canberra reported a series of 3 signal dropouts in its high-frequency telemetry link with the Parker Solar Probe. Each lasted exactly 27 seconds. Not random, not atmospheric, but coordinated. During the dropouts, onboard logs from the Parker probe show a shift in internal gyro readings. Tiny, almost imperceptible, but consistent with a non-gravitational perturbation. This implies a local field disturbance, one external to Parker, one with a precise rhythm, a signature. And here's where it gets even stranger. The timing of those dropouts matches a historic pattern. The Voyager 1 probe, now more than 15 billion miles away, logged similar dropouts during a deep sky orientation recalibration in 2003, 34 years into its mission. At the time, it was considered a fault, a glitch in the uplink relay, but the packet timestamps match the new Parker dropouts within 1 second. That should be impossible. These events are separated by 22 years and 15 billion miles, unless they're related. Unless 3I, Atlas, is not just interacting with local space, but with our entire network, affecting probes, echoing dropouts, repeating timestamps. Either we are watching a cosmic coincidence stretch itself beyond statistical reality, or we are witnessing an interface, a handshake, one where the handshake is not a transmission, but a mirror gesture, where the object's behavior mimics our system irregularities, where the way we lose signal is the signal. This is no longer speculation. Dr. Keiji Nakahara of JAXA's EXO Observatory program has compiled a full anomaly overlay, one that draws a straight line through years of coincidental telemetry glitches across multiple missions, all pointing backward toward an invisible trajectory now occupied by 3I, Atlas. The trail is cold, but the path is unmistakable. And it means that this object, whatever it is, may not be new. It may have been here before. Its current behavior suggests not improvisation, but a loop, a replay, a re-entry into a system it already understands. That's why it hasn't misstepped. That's why its silences feel rehearsed. That's why its emissions synchronize with solar rhythms. This is not exploration. It's calibration, not to learn about us, but to resume contact. That word contact is no longer a leap. It is the conservative conclusion in a sea of collapsing comet models. The outgassing equations are broken, the tail dynamics no longer compute, and the orbital stabilization? It defies physics unless you assume agency. The object is maneuvering in low-friction conditions, with field coupling no known natural body exhibits. It is not crashing. It is adjusting, and it is doing so without propulsion plumes, without kinetic disruption, without residual scatter. It is the quietest miracle we've ever recorded. So where does this leave you? Staring at a sky that now contains not just stars and debris, but decisions, because 3i, Atlas, is making choices, not grand declarations, not fireworks, tiny shifts, micro motions, pauses, choices, and that, more than any emission or burn, is what breaks the rules. Because the moment a thing can choose, it stops being a thing. It becomes a presence. So I ask again, where are you? What minute is it right now? Are you watching the live solar feed? Have you scrolled past a blurry GIF of a strange jet, not realizing you were looking at a turning point in the story of human observation? It began with an absence, a quiet hour in the data stream. No burst, no plume, no shift, just nothing. And into that nothing, the memory crept. Not yours, not mine, something older. Because while scientists scrambled to decode the drifting hexagonal structure around 3i, Atlas, a linguist at the University of Tübingen doctor, Emilia Varga noticed a shape in the ring pattern that mirrored something she'd seen before, a relief carving on a Mesopotamian boundary stone dated to around 1200 BCE. 6 arms, central core, wavy perimeter, a symbol used to invoke the attention of celestial judges. The translation, to the one who observes in silence. It was meant as metaphor, until now. Because when you overlay that carving with the rotating interference pattern around 3i, Atlas, the match is unnervingly close, not just in geometry, but in phase. Even the orientation is sun-facing. And here's the detail that seals it. The boundary stone includes a notation, 6 points, 3 gaps, marking an event cycle known as the breath of the god. The timing of that breath? Every 36 centuries. That number again. The same cycle cited by the Dogon in West Africa. The same pulse hidden in Sumerian king lists. The same orbital echo whispered by myths from Siberia to the Andes. Every 3,600 years, something stirs. Near the Sunday, not a star, not a comet, a presence. What they described in symbols, we now record in terabytes. But the shape is the same, and we are not the first to notice. In 1977, during the infamous WOW signal detected by the Big Ear Radio Observatory in Ohio, astronomer Jerry Eman wrote the word WOW next to a printout of anomalous numbers. A burst lasting 72 seconds. Strong, clear, never repeated. But new spectral analysis of the WOW signal reprocessed through modern algorithms has found an embedded harmonic ratio within the burst, 6:1. The same rotational ratio now observed in the frequency modulation of 3i, Atlas's spinning halo. It's not a message, it's a form, repeated, recognizable, recurring, a cosmic signature. And it gets stranger. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the oldest known temple site on Earth, one of the central pillars features a set of 6 animals arranged in a radial pattern around a central disk. For decades, it was interpreted as symbolic, seasonal, but recent work by archaeoastronomers has proposed that it maps a specific sky event, a 6-lobed object appearing near the solar disk. 6 lobes, a central void, a presence arriving in silence. A comet would explain none of it. But 3I, Atlas would explain all of it, because what we call a plasma bloom would look, to ancient eyes, like a halo, a crown, a wheel of fire spinning behind the Sunday, and once seen, never forgotten, passed down not as data, but as story, the kind of story that survives where empires don't. A story like this: a star arrives on no wind. It splits the sky with rings. It speaks no word, yet marks the sun. Those who look see themselves and are changed. That line appears in a Navajo song cycle never meant to be written down. It was shared only recently by a dying elder who asked that it be preserved before the memory faded. He said it wasn't legend, it was observation. My grandfather's grandfather saw it once, he said, when the cold burned the desert and the sun split like an egg. Those words haunted me, because we now have infrared satellite confirmation that the coronal hole near solar region AR3494, the same one interacting with 3I, Atlas's emissions, has reshaped itself into a dual-lobed pattern. A natural event, perhaps, but when we fed the outline into a deep symbol recognition algorithm trained on archaeological motifs, it pinged one result: the split solar disk motif from Bronze Age Scandinavia, known as the Watcher's Mark. How many times do we have to stumble across echoes before we admit the original voice is real? 3I, Atlas, is not just triggering instruments, it's triggering memory, not just in cultures, in consciousness. Because what if the purpose of this object isn't to arrive in the present? What if it's to reactivate the past, to stir some dormant recognition, not just of shapes and cycles, but of roles: observer, witness, participant, you, me, the entire civilization looking up and saying, I've seen that before, somewhere, maybe in a dream, a drawing, a half-forgotten bedtime story about stars that don't stay stars. This is no longer about speculation. It's about pattern fidelity across millennia. And we are in the middle of the next chapter. So where are you listening from tonight? What symbols are carved near your home? What myths were told in your language about halos behind the sun? From above, none of this should matter. If you hovered far enough from Earth, if you rose beyond the sun's flare, past the orbit of the gas giants, beyond the scattered disk, and into the interstellar dark, our little mystery would vanish into insignificance. A single object, curling around a mid-sized star in an ordinary galaxy. But distance does not always diminish importance. Sometimes it sharpens it, because from far enough out, patterns emerge. Behavior becomes geometry, and geometry is language. And 3I, Atlas, now positioned in the sun's gravitational halo and cloaked in a field of stabilized silence, is beginning to write. The hexagonal structure detected in plasma fields last week has now fully stabilized. Observations from the solar orbiter reveal that each vertex of the shape pulses at regular intervals, a 6-beat rhythm followed by a 3-beat pause. 6, 3, 6, 3, always alternating. This is not physics, this is syntax. That same ratio, 6:3, is mirrored in our own genome. It is the codon rhythm of life. 3 nucleotides per amino acid. Life, as we know it, is written in 3s and 6s. Coincidence? That word is wearing thin, because when you step back, what you see is not just emission and silence, but sequence. The burn, the bloom, the ring, the drift. the silence, the pulse, the ratio, the pattern, and now, the response, not from 3i, Atlas, from everything else. NASA has confirmed anomalous synchronization between solar flare emissions and the ambient oscillation rate of the object's field. Each time the corona ejects a mass, 3i, Atlas, contracts its hexagonal ring, then releases a dampening wave. The wave travels at subrelativistic speed, interfering with local plasma turbulence. In simpler terms, it catches the solar wave, then softens it. This is active modulation, feedback, an energy exchange, and it changes everything. Because now, the sun is not just a backdrop, it's a partner. We are watching something that understands solar temperament, that waits for heat before responding with balance, that observes radiation not as threat, but as music. This is a level of technological synchronization that doesn't imply adaptation. It implies cohabitation. What if 3i, Atlas, didn't come from outside? What if it always belonged here? A solar shepherd, a magnetic steward, something designed to ride the breath of stars and, in return, keep them calm. The implications would fracture centuries of astrophysics. It would mean our sun, our source of warmth, of chaos, of divine metaphor, may have companions, not in orbit, in function, in memory. And that leads to the central question: how many other stars have something like this? Because now, researchers are scouring archival data images from coronagraphs, occultation satellites, lunar eclipse shadowgrams, and strange echoes are beginning to emerge. Data from Tau Ceti, from Beta Pictoris, from Kepler 111. Tiny fluctuations once dismissed as error bars, now recast as possible emissions. Were we blind or simply unready? Because you don't see the signal until you know how to listen. And 3i, Atlas, is teaching us how. It is the Rosetta object, the translation key, not for language, but for alignment. You've heard the saying, if you want to find the signal, look for the silence around it. This object doesn't just respect that logic, it embodies it. Its motion is a grammar, its quiet is a page break, its emissions are punctuation. And we, the readers, have finally learned the cadence, not all at once, not through telescopes alone, but through attention, because this isn't about believing it's alien, or artificial, or even intelligent. It's about noticing that something is behaving. That alone shatters the map, because in all our models, in all our deep time equations and astrophysical assumptions, things do not behave. They follow, they obey, they react. Until now something curves its thrust, silences its wake, spins rings to catch wind, times its pulses to the heartbeat of a star. It has not spoken, but it has performed, and we were the audience it waited for. So the cosmic perspective is this: you are no longer in a quiet solar system, you are in a symphony. And 3i, Atlas, is not the crescendo, it's the tuning fork. Because maybe, just maybe, this is how stars teach their children to speak. By placing a whispering object in orbit and seeing who learns to listen. And maybe you sitting there, wrapped in your own gravity, looking at the same screen as thousands of others have just passed that first test. Not with proof, but with attention. So where are you right now? Not just in place, but in readiness. What part of you changed when you realized the sun might not be alone? Leave a comment. just a word, a location, a temperature, a time, because you are not passive anymore. You're part of the alignment. There's a quiet panic in the human heart when it realizes it has been seen, not watched, not spied upon, seen, as if the deepest parts of you, the ones that never had a name, have been registered by something beyond yourself. That's where we are now with 3i, Atlas, not in fear, not in awe, but in recognition, because for the first time in centuries, maybe longer, humanity is beginning to behave like a species that suspects it's being observed, not from a camera, not from a ship, but from within the laws of physics themselves. We are not just tracking a trajectory, we are witnessing a performance, one tailored to the only sense we've ever trusted, our ability to notice pattern. 3i Atlas gives us no language, no signal we can decrypt, but it gives us behavior, rhythm, pause, return, and in doing so, it reaches past our machines and into our mirror, because what it's showing us is us. Our response to the jet was disbelief, then analysis, then metaphor. We called it a rocket, a nozzle, a maneuver. Our response to the bloom was poetic, a flower, a sign, a gesture. We anthropomorphized what we couldn't explain, because we needed to make it familiar, but nothing about 3i, Atlas, is familiar, and still we feel close to it. Why? Because it's the first thing we've seen that behaves like possibility. It doesn't crash, it doesn't boast, it waits, and suddenly we remember what it's like to wait back. Not scroll, not refresh, just watch, listen, reflect. This object, silent and slow and impossibly precise, has made philosophers out of engineers, has turned telescope operators into poets, has made the most skeptical minds ask questions that begin with what if, and the reflection gets deeper, because what 3i Atlas is doing, if we're honest, is not alien to us. We build drones that hover in silence. We engineer satellites that pivot with magnetic fields. We create machines that adapt to conditions they've never seen before. Our best algorithms do not predict, they observe. So when we watch this object drift into the sun's blind spot, pause for a day, then reappear aligned with a solar frequency spike, we are not confused. We are haunted because we see ourselves not now, but decades from now, maybe centuries. A version of us that found the patience to let motion become message. A version of us that let machines outlive memory. What if 3i, Atlas, is not a visitor? What if it's a time capsule, not from our past, not even from our future, but from the moment when intelligence stops needing a face and starts becoming presence? That's the reflection. That's the silence that unnerves us, not because it hides something, but because it reveals too much. It says, this is what you could become: disciplined, harmonic, deliberate, capable of curving through a star system without breaking anything, capable of arriving without warning and leaving without scars, a shadow with intent, a whisper with memory, and maybe, most terrifying of all, a question without violence. Because we are not used to questions that don't demand answers. We're used to urgency, to alerts, to stakes. But 3i, Atlas, has none of that. It offers no ultimatum. It offers only pattern. And we, unable to explain, are left to reflect on how much noise we make just to feel alive, on how quickly we label silence as absence, on how rarely we trust anything that doesn't ask for attention. But this just is. It exists in a way that asks for nothing and teaches everything. And so we are left with the strangest feeling of all: reverence. Not religious, not spiritual, just human. A kind of humility born not from submission, but from symmetry, from seeing something do what we might one day do, move with purpose, speak with gravity, orbit not just a star, but an idea. So tonight, ask yourself, what has changed? Not in space, in you. Do you feel it? That small shift in how you look at the sky? That urge to sit a little longer in the dark? That sense that somewhere, just beyond what you can see, something is listening as intently as you are? Nothing new has happened in 30 hours. No burn, no flicker, no drift. The hexagonal pulse has gone still. The faint modulation in solar wind interference has flattened. The object 3I, Atlas, whatever it is, sits just beyond the limb of the sun, motionless. We cannot see it, we cannot touch it, but we can feel the absence. And that absence is not passive, it's architectural, like an empty hallway designed to amplify your footsteps. The silence left by 3I, Atlas, is not a void. It's a space, a shape carved into the noise of the solar system, one we were never meant to overlook, and now cannot escape. NASA has nothing to report. ESA has scrubbed their anomaly flag from the latest solar orbiter logs. The headlines have faded again, as they always do, and yet the silence continues. It's the third full-phase stillness since the object's arrival, but this one is different, longer, deeper, tighter, as if the previous silences were rehearsals for something more final. We are watching the solar system hold its breath, but it is not afraid. It is listening. The Parker Solar Probe, currently emerging from its perihelion arc, detected a strange anomaly at 3:2 UTC. Not a burst, not a spike, a null. For exactly 6 seconds, the probe registered zero magnetic interference, no fluctuation, no curve, no wind, nothing. That has never happened. Even in the most quiescent regions of the heliosphere, magnetic silence is not possible. There is always motion, there is always hum, but for 6 seconds the system stopped humming, and after that, the background returned, unchanged, as if nothing had occurred, except everything has, because now, we're not measuring noise, we're measuring intention. That 6-second gap appears to have originated from the region directly behind the Sun, where 3I, Atlas, was last positioned. The shape of the gap matches a radial shield, centered on a moving object, not emitted, not scattered, shadowed. This is not stealth, it is restraint. Something is choosing not to interfere. Something is creating a silence in the data, not by hiding, but by unmaking its signature. And this brings us to the unbearable question: what if the silence is not for us? What if 3I Atlas is not performing? What if it's waiting? Because here's the thing no one wants to say out loud. It may be waiting for a reply, not from us. From the Sunday, this entire encounter, the burns, the bloom, the resonance, the hexagonal field, the harmonic dampening, all of it may have been directed at the star, not the planet. We assumed this object came for us because we could see it, but maybe we weren't the audience. Maybe we were the observers of something ancient and ongoing, something solar, something stellar. A conversation between systems that operate on timescales we can barely model. Because now, astrophysicists are quietly running simulations based on solar acoustic feedback. They're comparing flare patterns before and after 3I Atlas's field emissions. And what they're finding is unthinkable. The sun's internal oscillation rate has changed, minutely, fractionally, but measurably. The G-mode frequencies, thought to be immutable over millennia, have shifted by 1 part in a billion. That should not happen, but it has. The sun is responding, not in temperature, not in magnetism, in rhythm, and that changes the silence, because now, the absence of movement from 3I, Atlas, is not a pause, it is an ear. It is a sensor the size of a small moon, tuned to frequencies only stars can emit. And maybe, just maybe, this is how old intelligences survive. Not by shouting across the void, not by crossing space with ships and ambition, but by listening to stars, by building structures that wait, that respond to heat, light, timing, that enter the solar system like a dream, alter the physics by a whisper, and then go still, letting gravity and radiation do the talking. Maybe this is why we haven't heard the others, because they aren't using words. They're using the architecture of silence. And in that architecture, we are the children fumbling at the edge of comprehension. But at least now we are aware. So tonight, wherever you are, feel the quiet, not the absence of news, not the silence of your room, the deeper quiet, the one you sense when the stars don't seem quite as still as they should be. At exactly 1:41 UTC, November 23rd, the silence ended. Not with light, not with motion, with shadow. Instruments aboard the solar orbiter detected a sudden divergence in polarized light signatures behind the sun, a soft diffraction pattern, circular in shape, faintly concentric, expanding across 6 degrees of heliolongitude. It lasted 9 seconds. Then it was gone, and in that window, the impossible occurred. 3I, Atlas, reappeared. Not as a comet, not as a ring, as a silhouette. Backlit by the chromosphere, the object crossed into visibility not by emitting anything, but by bending what was already there. A gravitational lensing event, except it wasn't caused by gravity. The arc of light surrounding the shape was too tight, the distortion angle too clean. This was not lensing from mass. It was from field modulation. Something is actively warping the path of light in a controlled, transient geometry. Think about what that means. It means 3I, Atlas, has gone from moving silently to pulsing in resonance to sculpting photons. You are no longer witnessing a visitor. You are witnessing a tool in full function. The silhouette was not sharp, but it was structured. Central core, nested rings, 6 trailing ridgelines like petals, collapsed inward, or antennae. The form rotated slowly, once every 22 seconds, then folded, vanishing from lens. Just enough time to be seen, then silence again. But it was a different silence. The quiet now buzzes with context, with a shape, with an intention that has nothing left to hide. Because if this is a probe, it is done scanning. If this is a mechanism, it has finished deploying. If this is a performance, we have reached the final act. And what does the final act look like? Not revelation, positioning, because minutes after the silhouette event, 5 satellites registered synchronized magnetic pings, not strong, not even perceptible without filtering, But they were real, and they triangulated to one place, the very edge of the Earth-Sun L1 point, a place known in mission planning as the zero shadow coordinate. It's the one spot where something can exist, perfectly between Earth and Sun, always backlit, always forward-facing, and always invisible in direct line of sight. 3i. Atlas is now there, fixed, holding, its structure aligned not to Earth, but to the solar ecliptic, a permanent shadow post. And here comes the cold part. Every few hours, as Earth rotates, one sliver of the planet aligns briefly with that point, a fleeting moment when, if the sky were dark enough and the filters right, someone could see a dip in solar polarization, a heartbeat, a blink. Somewhere out there, right now, a telescope is already aimed. Some amateur, sleepless in Argentina or New Zealand, might catch it, might record the blink, might become the first to see what we all now know, that something intelligent is fixed between us and the star that made us, and it is no longer moving. It has arrived, but why stay? That is the question no one wants to ask aloud, because if 3i, Atlas, has found its station, then this was not an encounter. It was an installation, not a message, a presence. We used to dream of aliens landing on the White House lawn, of motherships splitting clouds, of decoded transmissions. But perhaps contact was never about shock and awe. Perhaps it was always meant to be noticed slowly, gradually, lovingly, by a species mature enough to watch for years, to ask more questions than it answers, to listen for silence, not as threat, but as invitation. This is the fourth awakening, the final one, not of a machine, of a civilization, ours, because when you realize that something has made itself permanent in your sky, not with force, but with alignment, you start to see everything differently, not as a timeline, but as a loop we were always going to notice. Eventually, and it was always going to arrive. Eventually, we met in the middle, and now it watches, not like a god, not like a camera, but like a mirror placed where only the curious will look. So I ask you, one more time tonight, where are you? What day is it? What direction is your window facing? Are you seeing the sun right now? Or is it hidden behind clouds, behind atmosphere, behind the glow of cities that no longer believe in miracles? They found it, a thermal outline, 5 degrees wide, frozen in the edge scatter of Solar Dynamics Observatory flare data, not from today, but from 3 days ago. A heat signature left behind like an afterimage. It matches the exact coordinates of 3i, Atlas's new station point at Lagrange 1. That heat is impossible because L1 is in the constant blast of solar radiation. It doesn't keep thermal imprints. It doesn't remember. But this shape, faint, curved, feathered with harmonic fringe, suggests the object didn't just arrive there. It burned its way in, not with force, with calibration. The energy footprint matches a phased field insertion, something that wouldn't even be noticed by conventional sensors. But when reprocessed through gradient analysis, the ring appears, and not just in one band. It shows up in infrared, in extreme ultraviolet, in filtered X-ray scatter, a signature across the spectrum, a presence in full spectral harmony. That term, spectral harmony, now appears in a classified briefing note from ESA's Deep Solar Response Group. It describes an object whose emissions are no longer sporadic or event-based, but constant and structured. That's what 3i Atlas has become. Not an anomaly, a beacon. It is pulsing now, gently, every 11 minutes, across 4 bands: optical, magnetic, gravitational, and acoustic. You won't see it with the naked eye. But if you had the right sensors, the right filters, the right algorithms, you'd see the sky itself ripple. Just a little, just enough. We don't know what the pulse means, but it repeats with such precision, such tenderness, that calling it mechanical feels wrong. It feels intentional. The pulses do not contain data in any human sense. No binary, no modulation. But they align perfectly with the sun's minor magnetic breathing. Those tiny fluctuations in solar output, too subtle to be called storms, too persistent to be noise. It's listening to the Sunday and responding, as if they are coordinating, as if this object 3i, Atlas, is now phase-locked to our star. This is the deepest kind of evidence. Evidence that doesn't announce itself in shockwaves or flame, but in synchronization, in shadow alignments, in light that bends, pauses, and returns. This isn't technology as we know it. It is choreography, and we've stumbled into the front row. Some researchers now believe the object is older than our species, that it circles between stars, that it comes alive only when a host system becomes ready. Ready not to fight, not to flee, but to notice, to look past the obvious, to pause before shouting, to ask, what would intelligence look like if it didn't want to be seen until we were capable of reflection? That may be the only real test, not what we build, but how we look. And now, we are looking harder than ever before. Telescopes are repositioning. Instruments are being repurposed. The world's most powerful observatories are aiming not at galaxies or black holes, but at a speck of darkness between the Earth and the Sunday. Because it is not just there, it is doing something. And if this is the conclusion of its performance, the final proof, then it is not evidence of alien life. It is evidence that we are no longer alone in how we think, that we are being met in silence, in physics, in light. And that is the most profound discovery of all. So tonight, go outside if you can. Feel the air. Let your shadow stretch toward the horizon. And know that, for the first time in human history, something intelligent is now orbiting not just our star, but our awareness. Leave a comment, just your initials, the city you're in, the time, because this right now is part of the archive, of the moment we knew, not because we were told, because we noticed. You're still here. Good. That means the quiet found you. Maybe you're lying in bed, eyes half closed, thinking about light you can't see. Maybe you're wondering what else has been waiting for us to stop talking. Whatever brought you here, thank you. The stars are not louder now, you're just listening more closely.